Good afternoon, LinkedIn. Happy Friday, October 18th. End of quite a week. Gulf Coast Conference this week. Had some fun there with Josh Burkhalter, and we're going to do our best to recap and bring some takeaways and talk about what we learned. How you doing, Josh?
Yeah, I'm doing good. It is Friday. We've done nothing but Thursday shows so far. Spent the week in Galveston, so I've got my tropical gear on. I'm ready for the weekend. Nice weather in Houston, so let's go.
Yeah, it is taking a turn. The weather has so nice and cool out there. So I think we've started our 3 weeks of fall. So we'll definitely enjoy it while we can. I had some fun this week. I gave a nice talk on Wednesday, trying to share, what you and I have learned. Just the short time we've been doing this show for this other space, right? On the back of what I've learned, like doing a ton of shows, I guess in the SaaS ecosystem, HubSpot ecosystem, share knowledge. So not only on LinkedIn Lives, but also in person. Not always the most comfortable thing for me, but we got the job done. Had a packed room, which was good to see. Can often be, hit or miss when you're not able to, kind of control what the flow is for the event. And maybe I always think to myself, man, if I just had told a few more people, maybe we could have a few more people in there. But I think we had like 15 to 20 in there. And it was good just to get some confirmation for me that what we're doing is definitely, the right track as far as just finding new ways, different ways to start sharing knowledge in different spaces. And, really hoping to show other people that it's possible, because it's really like, once smart people understand what LinkedIn is and what it can be, they really start to leverage the platform in amazing ways. And the more people we can get doing that, I think this training gap, which seems so massive, that's been growing for years, maybe we can start helping it go in the other direction. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I think we can, and yeah, so I think we had 20 people. I don't know that those rooms hold too many more. So for those that aren't familiar with the Gulf Coast Conference, kind of the pattern of attendance, right? Tuesday and Wednesday is generally when the show is. Tuesday is generally much higher traffic. Wednesday is typically lighter. By the time we get to, I think we were like 1:00. By the time we get to 1:00 on Wednesday, to have a full room, like I think that's quite impressive. I think it shows that people are interested in the topic of like what else is out there from a tool set. Maybe a little bit of it was a novelty, right? It was a very different topic. These are oftentimes like application specific. How do I do this XYZ in chromatography? Or, Baytech hosted some quality control talks, which are pretty well attended usually, right? But this was very different. And I think based on the questions that people asked, kind of about how to get started, we had a conversation immediately afterwards with a Canadian pipeline company. We mentioned just kind of taking the phone out, just start recording a conversation that you're having with a colleague or using Teams or Zoom or whatnot. And he was like, oh, wow, I never thought about that, right? So it really is just starting to think about, like, do we have the need? Can we fill this void ourselves? And then where are those other resources that we have? So I think it's starting to work.
Yeah. And on that note, like when we started this, when we were talking back in August, I said the only KPI that I would allow that made any sense, because it's such, like, it's breaking ground, like in this space, like nobody does anything like this. We know it's not a ton of engagement, usually. So it's very hard to measure. So we talked about, hey, let's just get some shows in. And then as long as we hear at least one unsolicited piece of feedback that people have seen the show at Gulf Coast Conference, because that's where, in my short time, like the amount of in-person feedback is like really validating in terms of, it's those one-on-one conversations. Like you don't have to show yourself online, which, we always get to that part at some point of why people don't leverage LinkedIn. So when they're, it's one-to-one conversation, you get some open feedback, some open discussions. And I think we had, a fair amount of feedback.
Yes, Chris, you were right. I tend to be kind of bottom line. I wanted the success story, right? And I naively didn't know what really that meant, or really what I meant by that. I wanted to close a deal, et cetera, et cetera. But no, I think there were probably a dozen people, either directly or through a second person, who then mentioned that someone else talked about the videos that we had been doing, I think in just 5 short weeks. So I think that's a huge testament to the reach very early on, right? People aren't expecting this. It's not programming that's in your TV guide, right? It's not advertised. It's just simply organic. It's just the algorithm doing its thing. Apparently this engagement thing, right? It creates more engagement. Who would have thought? So yes. Thank you for having the right KPI, setting the right expectations. As far as I'm concerned, we far exceeded those. And by the way, there has been an actual like business into the business stick success as well, which obviously helps. But yeah, it was tremendous success, and I'm looking forward to kind of seeing where we go from this, where we go from here.
Yeah, that was awesome to see, and I think that success, especially like when you can break it down to just connection, conversation, relationships, like that's what business development is. That's why we go to the shows. So if we can accomplish that, that's what these shows are trying to do. Because not only, do you already directly have, like you haven't closed any, but you certainly opened one deal, sounds like. Now when we get to this show, it's always interesting to see like how it just kind of worms their way into the mind sometimes, because we can be, I don't think it's unreasonable to say that we have fairly distinct appearances with, bald heads and big beards. And it can be easy to think, well, of course, like if they've seen us on LinkedIn, they know that we're doing this show. And, but you start talking to people and it's like we get to the whole conversation. And it's like at that point, they remember like, oh, didn't I see you on LinkedIn or something? And it's like such a far connection. Like that's where they clearly haven't seen the show. They probably just skimmed right by it. But
Sure.
It's another point of like connection that starts to cement, right, some kind of identity in their mind that maybe next time they see it, they'll connect it back to the in-person conversation. Right. So that's one avenue. And then the second one, how many of those people giving feedback like might be on the show, themselves at some point. And that's where we really start to achieve the goal of like expansion of this knowledge sharing and getting other people comfortable with it. Because so much of this is just comfort level, sure. Right? Like so many times I heard, like, I'm just not sure I'm supposed to be on LinkedIn doing stuff like this. And it's like, what do you do? Like we're just sharing knowledge. Why wouldn't we be able to do things like this? Right. But that's the stigma. It's there, whether we want it to be or not.
It's interesting you say that, right? And since you mentioned that a few weeks ago, I've kind of been looking at like the pattern of engagement on posts. There are very often like sales and marketing people that, you would expect them to be on a LinkedIn throughout the day. They'll engage very quickly, right, throughout the day. But it seems like the technical staff, right, that maybe the hourly wage people that need to be, that are a little bit fearful for their job and what it might look like if they're on LinkedIn. Yeah, I get them very late in the day, right? Those are the people that sign on once a week on Saturday, and I'll get engagement then. And so yeah, maybe we can start to show people what LinkedIn is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they don't have to hide from it.
Yeah. And that's where I think it is just a little bit of show and tell, because everybody was talking about like the knowledge, that's walking out the door as everybody, starts to reach the end of their tenures. People that have been just killing it for 30, 40 years. It's impressive sometimes to see them still, killing it at this point. But I think, a lot of times there's something maybe external that kind of causes a major shift. And, I think COVID was one of those things, but, I think AI is going to have an impact as well. A few people mentioned that from varying perspectives, but that could be, the next wave of retirement, I think. And a lot of people are acutely aware of that and want to solve this issue, right?
Yeah, a few kind of conversations. There were several that I think you and I were involved in, and certainly others on Tuesday before you arrived. One was a person who she's a co-founder and owner of a company that provides, among other things, quality training. She was at our talk. She was quite engaged. She, like me, is a perfectionist, at least in the sense that, like, until it reaches our expectation of what the production value and effectiveness is, like, we don't start, right? And we lose all of that time. We lose all of that value and opportunity waiting for it to be better. And so we had a conversation with her after the fact, right? And I think she's someone that's like many other people who maybe it's starting to make more sense to just start doing. My apologies. There's probably a little bit of background noise. Hopefully it won't last too much longer. And then we spoke to a gentleman. You talked about someone 30, 40 years in the business. Curtis at Agilent has kind of been through so many different job roles. And he talked about, and again, I don't remember if this was on camera or not, but he talked about in his day, right, writing the procedure, building the process, training the people to follow so that he can move on to something else, right? So he took the approach like, I need to build an army, right, that can do these things effectively and live without me, so that he can move on and do something else and break new ground somewhere. And he specifically talked about how, people, maybe I was stealing your thunder. I think you're going to ask me this question, but he talked about, like, what's the, what can we do, right? We asked him the question, what can we do? And he said, you can just teach people the basics, right? So for him, that's something we talked about, how to do sample prep, right? Why do we do sample prep, right? Why is it important to control for certain factors? What's the impact, right? So a little bit of the, not just the what and the how, but the why. I think that's a lot of times what's missing. The significance of each step in the process. But yeah, what are those basics, right? I think we just start, right? Again, it could be sample prep. It could be how to use a pipette, right? We make these assumptions, right? That even when folks go to chemistry classes in college, whether or not they were taught those types of techniques, they may not have been taught them properly. They may not have been taught the significance of that and the impact that has on the measurement system and the results that they're producing. And then, we're all taught things and then we forget them or overlook them, right? So I think maybe we just take a step back and we really just get back to the basics. And if we think about it like that, I think that there are thousands of people that are going to watch our show over the next couple of months that have something to provide, right? They can provide something around the basics. So kind of tying that back into the the discussion we had during the LinkedIn talk at the conference is everyone in that room, everyone who was at that conference, particularly those that have some experience and some credibility and the desire, like they can just start, right? Whether that's jump on our podcast and talk about a topic for a half hour one week, or if it's doing something on their own, if it's hosting a little lunch and learn at their team, whether that's recorded or not, like let's just start. Again, I'm gonna borrow your words. You've said these things, right? You're gonna have the conversation today, or you're gonna have the conversation this week, right? You're gonna have it 10 more times, right? Capture it, right? So
Yeah.
I'm a believer, man. I'm ready to spread the gospel.
Right. No, I appreciate that. And it's true. I mean, it's what we're seeing. And I think it's not different from what happens at these shows. That's why I think it can resonate with people. It's just that comfort level of, oh, I'm doing it online. I don't have as much control, right? Once it's out there, it's out there. But that's where it's like, okay, maybe we don't pick, the highest stakes things to talk about on a live stream, right? It's okay to pick things like the basics. That's why I'm, glad it kept coming up. But it's an example of like, okay, well, we need to tell people what those basics even are, right? So helping kind of these, it's this interesting. My buddy last week, we were talking about how he could be a thought leader, right? In the space, for a certain like specific type of software, and the distinction is like he's a subject matter expert, right? But in order to be a thought leader, you have to actually be out there, leading thoughts, right? And that's where just helping people across that bridge, and it's going to be easy in this space, I think, when delivered properly, because people are already doing talks. They've been doing talks forever at places like Gulf Coast Conference. They are thought leaders already, like in person. And it's just about process, making sure it's not so burdensome, right, to do it online. Because there's definitely some wrong ways to create videos and try to create good online content. And that's where a lot of it you only learn. I mean, just like sales, just like any other job, like you learn through repetition, you learn through doing it, right? And, hopefully we can fast track some people just by getting on, being comfortable. And usually it's a self-realization. Like I think you mentioned it before. It's like, oh, it literally is just another conversation that I've already had 10 other times this week. Just doing it live on camera. Nothing bad happened after. Start sharing.
Yeah. And I certainly can't take credit for this one, but I will talk about a story, right? Like 5-6 weeks ago, there was the Houston area lab managers meeting. And I spoke initially about building a tribe on LinkedIn as kind of a primer for our discussion at Gulf Coast Conference. That was hosted at a facility that manufactures instruments. That host, one of their lead PhD chemists, gave an application-specific talk. He partnered up then with someone out in the refinery that is using that application, and they co-presented something that was extremely well attended, by the way. And then I saw one of them posted, I think yesterday, that they're now going to take that talk and they're going to record it and broadcast it, right? So again, I had nothing to do with that. They may have been inspired by us. They may have been working on this the whole time. It doesn't matter, right? Like people are starting to get the idea. So maybe we can get this wave going and take over this gap and this deficit that we have here.
Yeah. And I think we will. It's just too straightforward. Honestly, there's not. That's why I say I think this is the only way to solve for the gap. I mean, we've tried literally almost everything else in terms of the usual paths of making sure it's profitable for the business and making sure we're not misinforming and it goes through approvals. Like there's still all has a place. Like we're not even replacing that. But I think even in terms of, because that's often a fear of like, oh, if I give it away for free, right, then they're not going to buy the thing, right? And in reality, like if we share a 2-minute video about accuracy and precision and it starts to demystify the standard, now they're more likely to go and read the standard, right? Because it's not complete foreign language at that point. You start to build up these just, it's comfort, right? Everywhere. Like it's a new, so recognizing from our perspective that it is new and being empathetic to that, but then being able to challenge, especially the experts that have been doing it. They know their stuff, right? There should be no concern for whether or not they have knowledge to share and that they have the ability, to share it.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that, Chris. That's pretty well said. I will maybe pivot for a moment, and we can come back to this if you want. But we spoke last week about the upcoming conference, and one of the things that we talked about was just show up. Don't be afraid to just walk up to someone, particularly at a booth. They don't have any expectations that you're going to buy stuff from them, and just start having conversations. So I wanted to talk about that point. I didn't plan for this to happen, but I've got a friend that I've had for a long time. She doesn't work in the business. She actually is a speech pathologist, and she teaches or supervises like first and second year master's students that are getting into the speech pathology program at U of H. And she wanted to learn more about our business. She's kind of in the middle of her career and she wants to branch out, and that might involve coaching or doing other things. So she shows up to the conference, and I give her a 30-minute intro to what's going on, and then she just runs off. And then she comes back 5 hours later. Of course, she's got her bag full of goodies, and she's just beaming, right? Like she's like, man, everyone is so friendly here. This is, if you ever want to get into a business and just be welcome, this is it, Josh. She's like, I spoke to da, 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 da. And she had no understanding of this business other than she did a little chat GPT research. She looked at the presentations from the previous year, and then she did an hour of research, and she put it in a 2-page notes, and she said, validate that I know what I'm talking about. I'm like, yeah, you got the basics. Okay. So that's all she had coming in. And then she went around and she sought out vendors and people in different parts that kind of serve different needs. She had a job offer. She had someone at a third-party testing laboratory that 3 different times saw her in those 5 hours. And each time he came back up, he goes, I'm still thinking about our conversation and kind of how I can help you. Right. And he, like, the next time he comes back and he's got some ideas, I think it really just underscores what we were trying to communicate, that there's no secret here, right? Just show up and have conversations and see what happens.
Yeah.
And so I would just, I want to highlight that, like maybe a little bit, I told you so. We know a little bit about what we're talking about, having gone to these things for 20 years, right? So I want to point that out again in case, number one, anyone's listening to this show that didn't catch the last one, and number two, needed some evidence that what we said was in fact true.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, and not closing it out, I just want to say, like, if whoever's interested, like, it's pretty clear this stuff works. So, both from so what does work mean? Like, if we think of LinkedIn as like a networking space and a learning space, like success and value usually comes in the form of either some form of business development or talent development, right? And that's where just this, if you come at it with knowledge and value, like it's going to come back, and just creating the space for those conversations is half the battle. And know that you don't always have to go to the show anymore. But this also creates so much more value, at the show at the same time. I'm curious, because you'd mentioned a lot of people, or you've kind of mentally listed some people that you're excited to have on the show. Uh, is there any like specific topics or things that you're excited to talk to some people about that maybe we can get other people excited about?
Oh man, this is where I wish you'd give me that prompt before the meeting. So for those that don't know, if it has to do with like me recalling a memory, if I don't have like the trigger word to like uncover that and pull that out of the file system that is my brain, I have a hard time remembering things like that. I have some notes on that. In fact, I got to typing vigorously one night when I was in a flow state, and I was like, this person, and this is even how I want to introduce them and hype them, and then this is some things I think they would enjoy talking about. So I've started to do a little bit of that legwork, but yeah, nothing specific. But if I think about, we've got a lot of friends that work across the spectrum of organizations. I'd love to talk to people that work in like third-party testing, right? To talk about, because not all of our audience even really understands this, right? Like maybe a little bit about crude oil coming from the ground, right? How does it get, what type of testing is done? There's a multitude of testing, and I can talk about some of that myself, but like it would be more fun to bring someone else in. And then the transportation about that, when people think of upstream and midstream and downstream, like maybe we make sense of like the industry. And then how does the laboratory fit into that, right? And then depending on which part of the supply chain you are in or you're testing a material, what tests are more important, right? And what are the things that you focus on because of where you are in that chain? Things like that come to mind. Things come to mind like what are the differences between the focus of a laboratory that works inside the refinery when they're doing a finished product sample versus like a rundown process stream sample, versus if you're a third party and you're the intermediate between a buyer and a seller, like what's your obligation and how do you think about testing? I think one of the talks that Baytech hosted with Alex Lau this week was about using reproducibility to assess if like maybe buyer and seller results were close enough. And then what's the impact of those results relative to a specification limit? Maybe one person's on spec and one's off spec. Well, sometimes both of those results are statistically correct. And then how do you assess it after that? Maybe we bring someone on like Alex or someone that like has lived this out in the business, to talk about things like that. So those are a few things that come to mind.
Awesome. Yeah, I think there won't be any shortage of volunteers, it looks like, and it was awesome to see that. But I also want to mention, like, we talk about subject matter expertise and thought leaders, and I want to make sure, like, you don't have to put the knowledge on a pedestal necessarily, and like so much comes from kind of the ground floor of just sharing experiences and challenges. And I know not everybody's in a situation where they can, maybe openly share challenges in a safe way, but we've learned so much from just hearing how people can overcome those challenges, like as it relates to, sample prep and testing and, just learning the hard way, right? Like being able to share that with others has a huge impact, right? Because they're probably, going through similar things. And I think that alone, sometimes is enough, right? To know that you're not the only one. There's a lot of other people that aren't experts on 6299, right? But they gotta handle it every day. And that was what was it? RTFM? Is that the? I feel like I can probably figure out what that means.
Yeah, I'll change it slightly to read the freaking method. But yeah, maybe it is that simple, right? And I'll give a little. Are you familiar with the background of that? Or, I mean, you can guess, but did you actually live in a scenario where that became a motto in one of your laboratories?
Oh no, no,
Okay, okay.
no.
Well, so for those that are familiar, right? And I don't think it started anywhere near my generation. It probably started way before me, right? But there was a particular movement at some point where the procedures that people followed to run test methods, kind of became like the rumor mill, right? It was like playing the telephone game, right? And supervisors and people that were responsible for the whoopsies that happened as a result of that got really tired of it. And so one of the blunt tools was to like just have the motto of read the method, right? Like, because again, if you haven't even started with that, we talk about getting back to the basics, okay, but also, right, let's be mindful. These aren't necessarily easy standards to digest, especially if you don't have the experience. And so there's a middle ground to find, right? But that RTFM was all about like at least read the method,
Yeah.
gain it to the best of your ability the understanding, right? But that certainly does not, right, absolve management and the people that are responsible for the proficiency of the technical staff. It does not absolve them of the responsibility to put it in plain language and to provide whatever tools and help that's needed for people to actually understand what they're reading. Some of these standards are 75 pages long. There's 17 different sections. Do I read the whole thing? Do I take my own notes? Do I think that I understood and write down what I think, right? What's the validation process, right? So then I'm going to get into the quality management hat right now, but like there's other tools, right? There's test method assessment, or Alex used the term this week, a task assessment, right? It pull out the method. Okay, well, there should be, if you can expect again, I'm on the soapbox now, right? But if you can expect a technician to RTFM, well, then you can expect someone who's experienced and knowledgeable to do a deep assessment of the test method to ensure that your laboratory at least is equipped to run the test method according to the requirements, and then to make it in language that people can understand and follow while they're getting calls to hurry up and they're having to do 15 things at a time. And they know if they make a mistake, it's the end of the world, right? Like, let's give them the tools to succeed. So yeah, maybe one of the series we do is just digest a method and talk about the sections and what to focus on. And I think that could be compelling for some people as well.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be super valuable because I didn't know that. I mean, maybe I did know that was an acronym back in the day. I don't remember using it. I remember feeling it, when I'm on the phone with people and, it says there's uncertainty on the COA and, telling me my standard isn't working. And then we look at the method and it's like, yep, you can't hit this uncertainty. So this is just for, kind of our certification benefit, but your instrument, like there's nothing there that you're following that is going to say you can even hit that. And that's where I learned early on, like, okay, these disconnects. And I think that's probably, I'm starting to realize that more and more, like this importance of common language across these spaces where we're not necessarily paying attention, like to all the communication, like, because at those moments, like, who am I as a reference material provider, lab manager, right? Like telling a person that is trying to follow their own quality manual. I'm thinking about this real time right now, how presumptuous I might have been back then. That they are following a standard, they have a quality manual to follow. That's where it's putting everybody in a position to be successful is so much communication related, but understanding they're interacting with not just, customers, not just other lab personnel. It's, it's reference material manufacturers, it's other people in the supply chain. And when we're all talking about reproducibility and repeatability in different ways, that makes it real hard to learn, right? And if you run into, maybe guys like me or Josh, and we just sound super confident about the way we're talking about it, and it doesn't maybe match up with your process or, what your boss just told you, right? It just puts some people in it can put them in a spot, and that's where all you can do is have the conversations and making sure that be aware of communications around this or maybe lack thereof, so that we can help people understand outside of the moments where something went wrong, right?
Yeah, it's certainly much more comfortable to do it outside of those moments. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm excited, man. I'm glad it was a good event for you. Excited to continue this journey. It's really powerful to think about what's possible here. And it's like, I know I'm going to do everything in my power to facilitate all those people that say they're willing to start doing this. And there are some great people like already working on stuff, like Laptopia was talking about their online learning academy that I don't know if it's already launched, but they're in the process of making it. And I might end up we talked briefly about a community around that. Like, it's like everybody kind of knows based on something around them, like all the pieces that work in solving this problem. So hopefully we can, help everybody facilitate that and move the whole industry forward.
Yeah, that would be cool to see.
Sound like a plan?
I'm committed.
That you are, and I appreciate that very much. In the meantime, I'll still at some point figure out a good close to this series. Until then, I hope that everybody has an amazing weekend. Thanks so much, Josh.
All right. Take care, Chris. Thank you.